Hi, Sage, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, Anna. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm so well. We have set my puppy up with a massive bone. Hopefully, he'll stay happy for this conversation. He's in his teenage, years in puppy life, and yeah, you might hear him.
I think it's an honor anytime a doggy wants to make themselves known on a Zoom. So that'd
Yeah.
be wonderful. Yes.
Mm. And
Yeah.
no, everything's well over here. The sun is shining after a few days of rain. We're in autumn. How's it where you're at? Where you're based?
Beautiful. So I am based just about 20 minutes north of Boston in Massachusetts in the United States. So it's quite early here, but it's also the beginning of autumn and it's just been absolutely lovely. And so I think, is a really special time of year here as
Yeah,
well.
it really is. I've been like kind of thinking that I'm ready to watch Gilmore Girls again because that's like the autumn series. And I'm like, I can't. I haven't watched it for years and years, but when I was younger, when I was in early 20s, I think I watched it on repeat. I think I watched it
Yeah.
7 or 10 times, like the whole season. I'm like, oh,
Mm.
I'm feeling the itch, for like that
Mhm.
autumny mama
Mhm.
daughter
Oh,
series.
absolutely.
Have
Yep,
you
that's how
watched
I
it?
feel about the like anything to do with any sort of Halloween or fallish movies. We're quite close to Salem, Mass, where I am, and so there's all types of wonderful witchcraft and lore and all of that type of thing. So it's I feel you on having that itch around this time of year for something that's nostalgic and that you love.
Yes, I just set the table with like different candles of different colors, and I brought in some nature and some
Mm.
little mandarins and made it like
Oh,
orange and pretty. And yeah, I'm gonna
yeah.
continue doing that this afternoon. I just love
Oh, I
decorating
love that.
with the seasons.
Nesting. It's lovely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we're not here to talk about this, obviously. We're here to talk about your birth stories, and
Y-
we're gonna dive on into that now. So. Do you
Sure.
want to take us back to maybe conception? Was that something that was planned, or was it wow, here we are, we're pregnant?
Sure. Yes. So I feel like my story really begins with growing up and listening to my mom's birth stories of my brother and myself, like many other listeners I've heard on your podcast. She had actually amazing births with both of us. I'm her first baby, and I know the way she talks about it is that she had a very long labor with me, but everything was amazing and it was the best day of her life and all of these things. And then with my brother, it was the same story. He was born in like 45 minutes from her first contraction, some kind of crazy story. But I bring it up because I was always brought up with a real sense of female empowerment in the birth
Mm,
process from my mom. We have a very close relationship, and she's actually part of both of my birth stories. So, more about her later. But I do think that it laid the groundwork for a real expectation and hope that I could fulfill something similar as her
yeah.
stories with us. So, kind of with that in mind, my husband and we've been together for a very long time. At this point, it's been over 11 years. But when we first got married, we absolutely knew we wanted kiddos. We waited until we were in our early 30s to try to conceive our first baby. And I don't think I've heard any of your former interviewees talk about this, but I had what's called a chemical pregnancy with
Mm,
my very first. I don't think it's actually technically a pregnancy, but from what I understand, it's basically like sperm and egg meet up and it's like it emits just enough HCG to like get a very faint positive line on like a really sensitive early detection pregnancy test, but
yeah.
it just doesn't stick. And of course, I was like totally devastated by this, but in
Mm,
retrospect, I do believe everything happens for a reason.
yeah.
Um, so that
And
was like our first kind of experience.
yeah, and you know what? To me, that's pregnancy.
Mhm.
I actually have such an aversion to that, like biochemical pregnancy. It sounds like it's not real. It is
Mhm.
real. Like,
It felt very real.
yes, and I mean, it's just like I just want to like, pick up this language because we don't even think about it, but like it's so removed from like humanity, so removed from woman, so removed from life, so removed from I don't know, it hurts my heart, so many of these medical terms, right? Like that's just thrown
Yeah.
to pregnancy, birth, postpartum. I mean, just there's so many of these how it's
Mm,
worded that just takes
yeah,
away the magic. That was still a pregnancy. That was still like life coming together.
totally.
You know, that
Yes.
was
Oh,
still
I
your
completely
body
agree.
practicing. That was still,
Mhm.
so worthwhile mentioning. And
Oh,
I just,
good.
when I
Yeah.
hear biochemical pregnancy, it just sounds to me like something in the lab that
Yeah,
never was a part of you. Like
totally.
that was you. That was not, that was you and your husband and
Oh,
wife. And
completely.
yeah, I just
Thank
wanted
you
to
for
know that.
saying that. I completely agree with you, and that is absolutely how it felt to us too. So I very much appreciate you acknowledging that for sure. But luckily for us, that was definitely not the end of our journey. So we kind of kept on, keeping trying. And I think it was about 4 months after that that we did conceive our first son. We got married in 2019 and we were planning our honeymoon for the south of France in 2020. But of course, like everyone else's plans across the globe, that didn't happen. So we were planning a quite belated honeymoon for south of France, and that was going to take place in 2021. And we kind of said to ourselves, it'd be sort of nice to not be pregnant on the honeymoon, but we want nature to take its course. Let's just try for 1 more month and then we'll go to France and we'll resume trying in France. And of course, the month before we went to France was the magic month. And I just remember being at my grandparents' beach house up in Maine and taking like a pregnancy test and seeing just like the faintest of lines. I think it was still probably knowing myself about like 3 days before my misperiod. But it was there and it was real and we were so excited. Um, I love both my pregnancies. I've absolutely loved being pregnant. I had a beautiful pregnancy with my first little boy. Um, I loved learning about pregnancy, birth. We lived in the middle of Boston at that time, and so for my prenatal care, um, I was seeing a very traditional OB, but they had a midwife practice within the OB. And the OB's office, and that was one reason why I chose them because I mean I didn't know nearly as much as I know about birth and how important it is to advocate for yourself and how much I actually did want a fully natural birth, which I was lucky enough to have at that time. But I did know that I wanted to go kind of like with their hospital midwife team, very different than what I'll talk about with my second birth. But they were amazing. They were wonderful. Um, Everything was marching along smoothly, but there are a few things that went kind of happened in that pregnancy and that birth that really drove me to pursue a home birth and a different experience in time too. And I think that probably first started when I was maybe I think it was from the anatomy scan, perhaps around like like a little after the 20th week or so with my first son that they discovered that he had marginal cord insertion
Mm.
for the placenta. So it wasn't I believe it's called like filamentous cord insertion, where it's like really on the fringe of the connection, but it was definitely marginal. And that set off every alarm bell one could possibly
Mm.
imagine. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's my perception of how the diagnosis was given to me was like, oh my goodness, like we're going to really need to monitor you and the baby. And birth could be really challenging with this condition, and he might not be getting the nutrients that he needs. And so, therefore, we need to do like non-stress tests every single day from the very end, like portion
Oh.
of it was just like really blew out of proportion.
Yeah,
And
this is not true. Like for anyone listening, obviously, I mean, this is such important information because this is something I've heard from American moms and I've
mm,
seen on the social media as well. Sometimes I've been tagged in things where people go like, oh, talk to her or whatever. And it's really something that's not a thing here. That's not a thing. Like, I don't know why it's a thing. There's so many things in America that's a thing that you go
there are
like,
so
and
many things that are a
for
thing.
me,
Yeah.
I'm like flabbergasted. So it's just
Yeah.
a variation of normal. What you're talking about is like, yeah, so the cord is not in the center. That doesn't mean anything for your baby. Your baby's fine, right? Hallelujah, what's going on? And then the only time a marginal cord, or what you spoke of, filamentous as
Mm,
well, which is on the end and it's like in the membranes and all of that.
mm,
What's really dangerous is a medicalized birth with those
mm-hmm.
ones.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why my mind goes like, why are they so scared of this? Well, it's because they see things go wrong with these placentas because of they're putting on Pitocin, and they're pulling on the cord. They're doing the active third stage where they're pulling on the placenta. They're not, with that kind of placenta, you shouldn't touch it. Birth it naturally. Have a natural birth, birth it naturally. If no one
Mm-hmm.
pulls on the cord, the risk, because the real risk with it is that the cord would snap. Not so much with a marginal one, more so when they're really on the end there, but
Mm-hmm.
and really hanging just
Mm,
in the membranes. But even so, like, and it doesn't necessarily mean you can snap a cord anyways when you're pulling roughly on it, which a lot of hospital
sure.
personnel does. But really, with the marginal one, you just leave it alone, like,
Mm,
and then you're
I
most likely to
do.
find nothing's going to happen. Like, if you just don't touch it,
Yeah.
it's not going to go and break on its own.
Right.
And that's super
Right.
duper rare that happens. And usually that happens is
Yeah.
in that case, it's like super brittle for some reason, which they wouldn't pick up that it was.
Right.
Oh, and
Totally.
it blows my mind that that's
Oh
how
my
they were
gosh.
treated.
The tears I shed over the, and it's so
Um,
in retrospect, I agree with absolutely everything that you said. And the birth was completely non-remarkable in that sense. Like, and it just, I'm like, the time I've wasted sitting with non-stress tests to make sure this cord is okay. It was just totally absurd. So,
mm,
um, that was luckily the really like the major thing, if you will, that popped up in that pregnancy. But it was
mm,
a very traditional medical care in the sense that I did the glucose test with the drink, which I did very differently the second time, but everything marched along. And I remember I was really feeling towards the end of my pregnancy, like my plan was to work up until pretty close to my due date. Um, and I just knew that I needed to stop working to really focus on getting into the labor land zone in advance, like really tuning into my body. And so I ended up telling my work, hey, listen, I need to stop a little bit earlier. And thank goodness I did, because and they were completely fine with it, 100% supportive. Thank goodness I did, because I had one day of proper leave, and I lost my mucus plug that day. So at this point, I was 39 in weeks and 2 days. And
mm,
then on 39 in 3 days, I was just standing in my little kitchen in the city talking to my dad. Uh, and my water just completely broke. Like, it was like the movies. Like, it was very much, it was not a kind of like a slow indication of a trickle. It was a gush. And I remember that morning I had one of my typical checkups, non-stress tests, the whole 9 yards. And they said, "Oh my goodness, like, you're at a 1 centimeter. You are absolutely opening. Would you like us to sweep your membranes?" And like, they just like go, and I'm like, I'm not even 40 weeks yet. And so I, of course, think I had been listening to your podcast and
ah.
others like it. And I was like, "Oh, thank you. But no, I'm just fine, thanks." And so we kind of, my husband and I definitely had a sense that, like, that she basically said, like, don't go far this weekend. It was kind of it was a Thursday. She's like, I wouldn't fly off to, like, the mountains or the beach or anywhere that's, like, too far away from where you'd like to have a baby. So we kind of took that, and she was absolutely right, because, like I said, later that day it was just a gush. And I remember my husband had just gotten on his bike to go to ride his bike to the gym. And I mean, truly, Anna, there was just no mistaking what this was. Like, it was the movie. So I call him and I said, he didn't pick up, of course. I'm like, the one time that you don't pick up the phone when my water is so clearly been broken. Um, Finally got in touch with him. I said, "Oh, my waters have broken. Like, I just wanted to let you know." And he's like, "No, he's like, "You're kidding. Like, they didn't." I'm like, "No, they really did, babe." And he's like, "Okay, so should I finish my workout?" And I'm like, "I think you can, because there's so much, you hear all about these moms, and like, we learned in our birth class that it could be like days before birth happens at this point. Like, just finish your workout. No need to rush home. And I'm so happy that his intuition kicked in as well. And he said, I'm actually going to go home. So he did, and good thing he did, because pretty much right away, my contractions started very consistently and very powerfully.
Mm.
There was really not a lot of buildup in terms of um, labor kind of like progressing. I mean, this is a theme on this podcast, is that there really is no linear line that you should be looking for, ladies, with your labor,
Mm.
because it can go from 0 to 100, or it can go
Yeah.
from 0 to 100 back to 15. But I mean, it's just what your body's going to do. So, in this case, in this first labor, it was definitely trending upward pretty quickly. And I remember we immediately called my in-laws, Drew's parents, to come pick up our fur baby, our dog, because we had everything kind of in line with who was going to take care of him. Again, first baby, so we didn't have another kid to worry about. And then we told my mom, who was probably about 45 minutes away, we said, my waters have broken. Definitely contractions have started. They were clear, the waters were clear. So at the time, I'm sure if they were tinged any sort of color, I would have run right into the hospital per their instructions. But luckily, they were clear. So my um, father-in-law and mother-in-law came to get our dog, and I just remember I was in our tiny little living room over a birth ball, just like definitely moaning and really kind of feeling it. Like it was definitely, there was no question that this was happening tonight in my mind. There was a lot of like clearing out in the bathroom. I mean, it was just so textbook what you hear. My husband said, honey, you need to eat. Like, let me heat you up some meatballs. I looked at them and just was throwing up. Like, probably, I would say this was like maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours after the water is having broken. And
Wow.
so, yeah, and I don't know why I thought this was a good idea, but I was like, we should go for a walk. So it's so ridiculous that I thought this, but again, like I'm trying to listen to like, oh, you want to keep labor going, you want to keep moving, which is all well and good, but perhaps not for. I feel like I'm just a lot more in tune with my body now. I was so much farther along than I sort of thought I was. So
Yeah.
we're walking up our little city street. I'm This is so embarrassing. Literally throwing up like on people's like doorsteps. Drew's like, we need to revert home now. Like this is definitely like if we're gonna be doing this in the hospital, we need to go. And he was completely right. So my mom got there. So this was a Friday night, and I remember I was in the car, terrified to get in the car for good reason because it was not great in the car. I'm in the back. I have my like throw up bucket. All the windows are down. My husband is like blasting Enya, my birthday, like through the streets of Boston. And it, like I said, it's a Friday, so there are people are out at the pubs, like these cute places, and I'm just like looking at, I wrote this in my birth story. I'm like, I can't believe like I'm having a baby and all these people are just out drinking right now. Like it's just so funny how like the world just
Yeah.
goes on. And but that's kind of the point of birth, right? Like it's just a
Mhm.
natural event. I mean, truly is like just something that's going to happen and the world is going to move forward. So yeah, Enya's blasting down the streets of Boston. I'm very, very much in my zone. We get to the hospital, and this is kind of where I think it's important to touch on a few things that really led to the choice for number two to be at home. So we kind of get in, the lights are bright. I- I'm at this point in almost transition, but unbeknownst to me.
Mm.
And we kind of walk in, and there's, a pleasant enough check-in person, but she's asking all the questions and all the details. And I'm like, I felt, Anna, like, when you're trying to get home on a plane and you feel like, I just want to be home. Like, I'm done with the waiting in the lines. I'm done with the another delay. And you have that sense of really just wanting to be touching down in your own country or touching down to wherever you're going to be. It felt like that, but just on such a greater extent of I just want to be in the birth room where I can shut off the lights and give birth to this baby. And I kind of knew there were going to be tons of hurdles just like an airport in order to get to that destination of where I wanted to be. And it just felt really tough. Um, so there was this other pregnant woman in the lobby, and she was so sweet. She's like, "Oh, I'm gonna have a baby tonight too." And like normally I would have just jumped on this conversation and like indulged every which way, but I was like, I was like, there's no way she's going through what I'm going through right now because I'm like about to die, like in terms of
Mm.
really being close to it, to like actually giving birth, and just felt so like we were not relating on the same level. And then the next kind of thing I'd say that was really kind of something I reflect back on is I don't just think was appropriate at all was we get in the triage room, and I change into my gown, and they were like, okay, we need to check you. And at that point I was completely fine with it. And they said, oh, okay, yeah, wow, you're at a 6, you're 100% effaced, and the baby's head's at a 0. Like this baby's like absolutely coming soon. You're definitely not going home. And they kind of looked at me and they said, what do you want to do for pain management? Like, do you want us to get the epidural ready? And I was like, I don't think, and I already had known this, like that I didn't at this point in time, I didn't really want an epidural, but I was kind of open to it. But I said, no, like, I think I'm okay. Like, I think I'm okay for now. Like, I'll let you know if I change my mind. And the nurse is like typing in the notes, and another nurse comes in and she goes, oh, does she want us to get the epidural lined up? And the person typing the notes is like, she says she doesn't want any pain management, and kind of like gave like such like a just like super negative, like, oh, like she thinks she's not gonna have an epidural. And it's not like I mean, I was definitely like in labor, but I was not like freaking out or I was very much like in my headspace control about this. And I just remember thinking to myself, if this woman is going to be in the room for this baby coming, I definitely am going to have my mom or husband kick her out. Like I distinctly remember being like, she's not going to be around. She wasn't. It was luckily not an issue at all, but just wasn't really like it just is in comparison, Anna, to like the home birth, the love and care that I received. They never would have said a word like that. So
Mm.
they shuffle us off finally to the delivery room. And I remember just feeling like that feeling of being where you were trying to get to be and just like really letting go. My mom and husband did such an amazing job, like shutting off all the lights, and hats off to the hospital, by the way, for actually letting us do this. Like, I mean, they had the speaker with the Enya and the birth affirmations. They had the fairy lights. The midwife who, like the hospital midwife, who I had not met her before, but she was lovely and she was 100% hands off up to this point, which I really do appreciate and respect because again, this was a very traditional Boston hospital setting. Um, they just let me labor. And it was not long before that baby was there. So they kind of said, I think that you might be ready to push. That last like moan sounded really pushy. And it was. It was like a really deep, kind of like guttural moan. And they said, let us check you one more time. And I remember I did not want to get on the bed because I was standing up over a birth ball, kind of like, and that's actually exactly how I labored with my second as well. And they said, okay, yeah, you're at a 10. You're ready to push. I did not feel the urge to push, I remember. Um, and I think in retrospect, I really wish that I hadn't started pushing at that time because I don't think I was quite ready. I might have been at a 10, but I don't like my just knowing what happened the second time.
Mm.
I don't think it was quite the right time. But
Yeah.
I will say, one point I would like to make for like the audience is at this point, I very distinctly remember thinking to myself, this was nowhere near as bad as they say
Mm.
that it's going to be. Like and I do not, I am not somebody, I'm a mentally tough person, but I am not someone with this like super high physical pain tolerance. And that makes perfect sense because birth is by design.
Yeah.
Like the cascade of hormones that are helping you just naturally when you let this process unfold does the work. It does the work for you.
And
And
it's not so much about being like, if you're a first time mama listening to this, it's really not about having a high threshold. It's like being mentally strong, which you actually talked about, right? You're mentally strong. And that is the crux. It's like, how can you with internally both allow the intensity, but also coach yourself through different stages. Like you were coaching
Mhm.
yourself through the wait period when you get
Yeah,
ready, for
yes.
example, right? You're
Yeah.
probably having internal dialogue and like, that's where the mental strength happens. When
Mhm.
someone doesn't have that, they might spiral more easily in those situations and
Completely,
just lose it
completely.
and be overwhelmed by the sensations.
A
Whereas if you can,
100%.
yeah, if you can hold your own while shit hits the fan around you at the same
Mhm.
time, because especially if you go into hospital, you're going to meet so many different hurdles usually that you have to be mentally strong to turn within and maybe like let your partner handle, your mother, your doula, your support
Mhm.
person, whatever. And it sounds like you have that, right?
Yes. Yeah, oh, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I do think, mamas, it is important to really hone that mental strength.
Yeah.
Your body is going to take care of the physical sensations. It's your mind that can get derailed. And
Mm,
if you set it right where you want it to be, that is only going to serve you. And it's not easy. No one, I don't think anyone in the world would say that it's easy. But it is probably your greatest tool is your mind.
definitely.
Um,
And
and
with what happens in hospital is that the way they treat the very few natural birthing mamas who choose not to be medicated, they will treat you the same they treat someone who's medicated. So if
mhm,
someone is on an epidural, um, then they need coach pushing, right? They
mhm,
need that. They're on their
mhm.
backs, they're working
Yep.
a baby uphill. It's
Yeah.
like there's so many different reasons why then there is a point to be coached when you have a contraction. You might not even feel it. And so there's
Mhm,
like, okay, here's the CTG monitors telling us right now you're having a contraction. The mama might be totally numb. But a natural birthing mama does not need to be coached in pushing at all, should not be. And just because you're fully, just like you had the experience of, you can actually be fully. Women can even walk around being fully not even knowing they're in labor. Like again, dilatation means nothing, actually, truly. Um, so it's more about how far down the babies come because when they get really low, they will make you involuntarily push, just like you will vomit when you're ready to vomit. Imagine trying to vomit when you don't want to vomit.
exactly. That's
Like,
such a great way of putting it. What a beautiful, perfect way of putting it. It's so relatable and so true.
mm.
Yep.
So how did you go with
Yep.
that
So
pushing then?
yeah, that, I mean, it's just the best analogy. I've heard it before here, and I think everyone needs to hear that. Like, wait until you feel like you need to push the same way you wait and feel like you need to vomit. I mean, your body knows what to do. So I was standing up with like about to give birth, and they said, we really need you to get on the bed. And I said, okay, if you can make the top of the bed incline upwards, I will kneel upright on the bed. And they said, no problem. So I was kneeling upright on the bed, and I had my husband's hands in front of me, and I just had him right in my face. And this was one difference between my births that I thought was really cool actually about this first birth. I think it was probably because it was a little longer. I was completely out of my body in this moment in time. Like I very much remember feeling like I was like on the ceiling looking at myself. It was just so in that kind of outer world trance. And it was really cool, actually, in retrospect. I remember thinking about that a lot in the days following the birth. And um, that was kind of the moment, though, Anna, when everything changed in the hospital because he was about to come out and they got very freaked out about his heart rate. They had the continuous monitoring on. Yes, I know. I'm seeing your reaction, and I felt the same way. And they said, okay, the entire neonatal team needs to come in here. They flipped on all of the lights. I mean, truly, he was about to come out, like, and they brought me right back, like, in to my body. They said his heart rate is really kind of I think it was dropping. I think
So
it was the D
normal when you
cells. So
push a
normal.
baby out, like,
Like he was right there. And I don't know why, but they felt the need to have like everybody in the room. The lights came on. And I just remember feeling like I'm gonna get this baby out on the next couple of pushes because I don't want, I'm like, I am right here. I am not having them interfere with this baby coming out. I'm not having a vacuum. I am not having forceps. I'm not having anyone touching me. Like,
Mm-mm.
I've made it this far. And if this baby needs to come out, which they apparently think he really needs to, like, I'm going to get him out. So I just like gave the next push like a complete my all, and he did. He came flying right out. He he came out so fast he actually just hit the bed. Like he nobody caught him, the poor babe. My sweet love. Um, and he was completely like I mean, I just remember just a pause on the importance of that moment. It was amazing to just
Mm.
look down and see it. And of course, you can't, you know that there's a little human in you for 9 months, but to see
Mm.
their little face and it's a person. Like it's a full blown baby, right? I mean, it was just amazing to just scoop him up and bring him right to my chest. And it, the neonatal team being in there was 100% unnecessary. He was so healthy. There was absolutely nothing wrong with him. I felt so blessed in that moment that he was just a healthy, happy, screaming, crying little babe who just wanted to breastfeed, just like nature intended. There was no need for any sort of alarm. And so, of course, everyone's bawling their eyes out. My mom, my husband, myself, the baby. So I have him on my chest. And the next thing I know, I look down and I just see it was the midwife yanking on the cord. Now,
Oh
mind
my
you,
God.
yeah, like Anna, I think this was probably 10 minutes after he was born yanking. Now, we just talked about the fact that I've had this whole marginal cord insertion diagnosis, this whole
Yeah.
pregnancy that's made such a big deal
Yeah.
in the final parts of my prenatal care. And to just like look down and like I remember it was like a look of like actually like if you were
Mm.
exerting effort to pull something out.
Yeah.
And I was very much like, what is going on here? So she was like, can you give me a push? And I was like, sure. So I did like the slightest of pushes and the placenta came out absolutely no problem, but it was very managed. There was no asking about whether that was okay, and I remember thinking to myself, I think this cord might snap.
Yeah.
Like, and thank goodness it did not. But
Yeah.
it just goes to show like the medical system kind of goes against like their own kind of diagnoses sometimes,
Yeah.
right? Like, does that
Yeah.
make, and I think anyone with a brain would think that that doesn't actually make sense to
Yeah.
be ripping a marginally inserted cord
Yep.
out of a woman.
In all of healthcare, in all the different fields, the one field that practice the most non-evidence based practices is obstetrics.
Hmm.
Not in midwifery, and I'm talking like independent midwifery, not the obstetric nurses that work within that obstetric field, right?
Hmm.
But in obstetrics.
Yeah, totally agreed. 100% agreed. So, that was, and everything kind of went on just fine after that. We breastfed. They were very sweet in the hospital, but I remember leaving feeling with a couple takeaway messages.
Mm.
First and foremost being, I am so proud of my body. I cannot believe that I just did that. I
Mm.
am so empowered. That was the first thing, and I feel very fortunate that that was my number one takeaway.
Yeah.
Number two takeaway was I'm not doing that in a hospital again.
Yeah.
And to my mom even said, I think for your next one you should have the baby at home.
Mm.
And I totally agreed with her. Um, so 12, is it okay to transition to baby number two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So we so between my two babies we did have a miscarriage, so it was an early loss, and I always appreciate mamas who share that on this
Yeah.
podcast because it really does make you feel less alone in the moment.
Mm.
And it's just, unfortunately, it is such a common and just part of, I think, life, and there is that delicate dance between birth and death
Yeah.
that just exists. It just does. It's the way it's always been, and it will
Yeah.
be, part of her story for sure.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
um
What week was that?
Yeah, so it was an early loss. It was about 6 weeks, the
Mm.
6 week mark. And you know, I also am proud of my body for knowing that, and that baby for knowing that that just wasn't the path, right, for that little spirit. And
Mm.
I actually think that that was my possible baby's current baby's spirit though coming back because um, that loss happened in February of 2023. So my first little boy was, and he was only about like 10, 11 months. And we were like, let's just kind of go for it. We got pregnant the first try. That was what resulted in the loss. And then we said, you know what? That was hard. That was emotionally very hard. It was physically very hard, even at an early loss phase as well. And I said, why don't we take this year? Let's really just enjoy our little bub. And let maybe perhaps we start trying kind of like in during the holiday season, and then we can have like another summer baby. And you do all these like logical
Mm-hmm.
planning
Mm-hmm.
steps.
We try. We try.
Yeah, which is like so silly. So excuse me, my first son had his first birthday, and my husband and I were being trying to be very careful. I was not on birth control. We were doing basically like rhythm method, just trying to be really cognizant. And my husband went away to go hike on Mount Shasta with my father and my brother. And so he was gone during my ovulation, what I thought was my ovulation window. And he came back and my period was due in about, I think, 3 days from his return. I said, "Oh, like we don't have to be as careful right now. I'm so regular, which I normally am.
Mm-hmm.
We're good. We're totally good." And he's like, "Okay." So we're not careful. And then the next couple of days, I was expecting my period, like I said, like truly within 3 days, no period. But I did test positive for COVID. And so I was like, oh gosh, I have COVID. Like that stinks. So I reached out to my OB and I said, hi, probably about like 3 days after my missed period. And I said, I do have COVID, but I don't have my period. It was 2, 3 days ago. This is in my like notes. There's no way I'm pregnant. But like, could COVID be affecting my cycle? And they said, oh yeah, absolutely. COVID affects cycles. This is one thing we know. So I'm like, oh yeah, great, it's COVID. So like another week goes by and I'm feeling completely fine at this point, like no COVID symptoms. And I'm like, where is my period? I was like, I might take a pregnancy test. Take a pregnancy test, glaringly positive. I'm like, how can this? I mean, I was so thrilled, and it actually felt like such a special, genuine surprise to be pregnant. Because
Mm.
with our first son, I'm looking for any sign.
Yeah.
Oh, was that perhaps like the pinch of like implantation? Like, oh my
Mhm.
goodness, what's this? What's that? And to just have that genuine surprise was, in
Mhm.
retrospect, such an amazing aspect of his conception. Um, and that day, I remember I told my husband, he was shocked and also really surprised. And I was going to pick up pizzas. And of course, I'm listening to your podcast. And it just happened to be that the woman who you were interviewing said, she said, I ovulated really late in both of my pregnancy cycles for both of her children. And I
Mm.
was like, it was just so fortuitous, Anna, that
Mm.
I was hearing that very much in what was happening to me real time, which I think is such a special aspect of this podcast. Like listening to all of these relatable moments
Mm.
from across the world made
Mm.
me feel so I just remember crying in the car. I was like, oh my gosh, that happened to me. Like as well. I'm so excited.
Mm.
So pregnant with him. Um, so they are quite close in age. They're 21 months apart, like when you do all of the math. So I call my traditional OB. We've at that point we've moved out of the city, we to where we are now in a suburb of the city. So I gotten a an OB a little bit closer, and just out the gate, I was like, I'm gonna start the OB care just to kind of like get the initial appointments done, and at the same time, I'm gonna interview home birth midwives. And the OB, it was just such a nightmare. Like they messed up the blood tests. Like they were so discombobulated. It was just everything in the world was pointing with like a big hot pink neon sign, like home birth, please hire independent midwives. Like these people don't know what they're doing. You don't feel comfortable. The last birth was so incredible. Like you really don't need this type of managed care. And in fact, the receptionist at the OB said, she was, I don't know why she works there because she was like, my daughters had 5 babies at home and they were amazing. And I was there for them. And she was like this home birth advocate. And she's the sweetest woman. But working in the OB's office, I was like, if the stars are not aligning on this being the right decision, I just trusted my gut immediately. So I started interviewing independent midwives. There are not a ton in my immediate area. I do think it's because, again, I live so close to Boston, which is very much the epicenter of a lot of healthcare um, globally. And so there's just not as many. Like I hear a lot of women on your podcast talking about, you know, that it's like in their communities, it's sometimes more of a thing. That
Mm.
is not really the case in Boston. I'm actually like pretty much an outlier. I don't know anybody that's had a home birth except for a very kind of distant second, third-ish cousin type thing.
Mm.
And she's not even in my state. She's up in New Hampshire.
Mm.
So I didn't have a ton of options, but man, when I tell you I'm so in love with the folks that I chose, it was just amazing. So I remember interviewing them. I loved their website. I thought it was really, really well done. And it just drew me to feel like they were really competent. And one question I asked them in my interview with them was, what would you do with a breech birth? And their response was, and again, I don't know why I asked that question, but the mama intuition knows. And they said, well, the particular midwife I was speaking with said, I would consider myself the leading breech home birth provider in this state. Like I'm called in to home births for births where other midwives are kind of
Mm.
responsible for to assist. And I just loved that answer. And I said, awesome, like you guys are hired. So we immediately started care with the home birth midwives in my living room on my couch with tea, with hour-long, cushy, lovey, amazing appointments. Not a single finger in my vagina for like no need for it, except for one time, which I will get to. And it was just an amazing set of women who were just so knowledgeable and just cared. And it was like, this is how healthcare should be. I wish every woman had that opportunity um, to make it work for her.
Mm.
And so we kind of just plugged along, did not do the glucose drink. I did a they even the model of care is very much like we don't have to do this test. We don't have to do this test. If you want to do it, we can do a, a natural variation of it with some fruit and stuff if you really want to know, but we don't need to do it. And that was really their approach with everything.
Mm.
And it was such a breath of fresh air. So we got to probably like the 24 ish week point, and I just started to feel the baby on my right side and just like a lot of action up in my right rib cage. And
Mm.
so this being my second pregnancy, I did know said this feels very different than my first pregnancy. And this baby was really active, but the positioning feels off. So we were like, okay, let's kind of keep our eye on it. So we got to kind of the 30 weeks, we got into like the early 30s, and the midwives are over at a checkup and they said, Saige, I think I think your babe is Breech. And I said, I think you're right. Like I just think that. And they were kind of feeling around and they said, yes, that's his head. Like his head is definitely kind of right up here. So without and they said it, Anna, so just like baby's Breech. These are the things that we can do about it. You can still have the baby at home, Breech. Like it was just so like I know if this had happened in a hospital, they would have been immediately booking me in for a C-section.
Mm.
And they were like, here are some things we can start to think about doing. They're like, meditate to your baby, talk to your baby,
Mm.
spinning babies, Here's the number of an amazing acupuncturist who can do moxibustion. I mean, it was just
Mm.
like the endless list of resources to
Yeah.
just naturally encourage this little babe to flip if that was his destiny.
Yeah.
Here are the options. And if not, we
Mm.
are comfortable doing this at home as long as you are.
Yeah.
They did want me to have an additional scan just to determine what kind of breech he was.
Mm.
And I do remember going into that scan and the tech put the probe on my belly and I just immediately saw two little feet. Like, and I was like, oh yeah, he's totally breech. Um, and so I just did first of all, I don't mean to downplay how scared I was about this. Just for any mama who's
Mm.
out there who is planning a home birth and she finds out, or any birth, and she finds out that her babe is breech, there were definitely also a lot of tears shed about this. There was a little bit of a crisis of confidence, but ultimately I really got comfortable with this baby is going to be born at home, no matter his positioning. I'm going to try to get him to flip, but if he doesn't, I'm
Yeah.
going to surrender to that. And I did. I took the pressure out. I mean, now granted, I was lying upside down on the my grandmother's ironing board in my living room. I was like trying to encourage him to like flip. I was doing every spinning babies
Yeah.
mile circuit. I mean, just truly everything. And then I do remember I went to an acupuncturist with the moxibustion on my toes, and he was really, really active in my belly at that time. And I never felt him flip.
Mm.
However, at my 37-week at home in my living room appointment, my midwives are over and they're just feeling my belly and they're just like wise hands, like just so gentle, so confident. And my midwife says, I think the babe flipped. And I said, you do? I was like, I
Mm.
didn't feel him flip. And she's like, I think he flipped. And I said, is there any way that we can tell this for sure? And she said, I am happy to do an internal examination to see if I can feel the head, like just to see if I can feel his head. Um, if you want me to, if not, I'm comfortable honestly saying he flipped. And I said, I actually do think I want you to tell me if you can feel a head down because I was also feeling at this point, and now my first son was born a week early and I was really kind of coming up against like coming to the 40. And so I had a hunch he might be born early. Uh, he was not, and I will also speak to that in a moment. But I wanted to know. So she does. She does an examination. She says that is a head 100%. Let's just try to keep him there until he's ready to come. But you have made this babe flip, or more rightly, I'd say that the baby has decided that he would like to
Yeah.
flip.
Because this is really important information is that actually most babies who are breech will turn before birth.
Mm,
And babies can even turn during birth. And so I think that's really important information that just no one really talks about, especially not in the hospital. And it really is seen as not, as a high risk pregnancy and birth. And I also want to say that I totally understand that you felt fear. And I think 99% of women who discover they have a breech baby will feel fearful because that's just the culture. That's just what we've been taught. And it's just that it's what's in our society. And having such confident midwives who are confident in home birth makes the world of difference because also they are very few.
mm,
They're very few. It's coming back, and there's people that are working to train midwives to be comfortable with having, managing that variation of normal. And it used to be just a variation of normal at home, in hospital, and then, that all shifted with the breech term trial that's since then been debunked. But the culture just changed, and there's so much fear around it. So I really want to like honor you with that and
mm.
really I think most mamas discovering they have a breech baby will have to go through the tears and the fear and
Oh
and
yeah.
and
Yeah.
research and coming to a decision either that actually I don't feel comfortable birthing a breech baby. I do want my baby to turn and do what you did, or maybe even go and do an ECV,
Yeah.
which is like
Mhm.
midwives or doctors turning the baby gently, hopefully, again,
Yeah.
depending on the
Yeah.
practitioner.
Yeah.
And it's really up to the baby. The babies will turn if they don't want to be head down. Some
I
babies
totally
want to
agree.
be, birthed, yeah, with the feet down. That's their birth imprint. That's how they want to come through.
Mhm. Definitely agree. And I
Mm.
think one resource that was Dr. Rachel Reed's book, Reclaiming Birth as a Rite of Passage, I think
Mm.
it's called. Just amazing. And I think that that book really helped me it's in like get in tune with just the ancient wisdom of this process. And it was just an amazing read, and I highly recommend that
Mm.
any mama read that book. But I think it helped me with the breech kind of news also, just feeling like this is just so ancient. Like this is just how this babe is going to come out if that's what he wants to do. And we can do this. Like this is okay. This is okay. And finally, when I think I got to that point, I don't know, but I think it might have freed up something in me to make that babe flip. And he did. And so I was really, really fortunate for that. And so this time around, I could sense that I was close, kind of like getting closer. My birthday is New Year's Eve on December 31st. My due date was January 12th. And I said to myself, I'm definitely going to stop working a lot earlier than I did last time because with my first son, you might remember I had one day kind of off and then my waters had broken. And so I said, I think that the December 31st is going to be my last day. Again, work was quite supportive of that. On my birthday, I lost my mucus plug, and I said, I was so excited because I was like, oh my gosh, this is, last time this happened, my water broke in 24 hours. And newsflash, mamas, like, please don't compare like your two labor experiences because I was sorely disappointed to be waiting around for another 3 weeks for this baby, which was completely normal. And I think you really need to mentally prepare to go to 42 plus weeks
Mm.
just in your mind. And I really shot myself in the foot by telling myself that this baby was going to come early, that just because I had lost my mucus plug last time, that's going to mean this time, second time baby's going to come before. Like all these stories you tell yourself, like just let them go because the mental waiting game for me was very hard. And it was not a long waiting game. Like compared to some mamas who I hear who are waiting past the 40 weeks. I mean, it was just like, I wish I could redo that in my head of just definitely stopping working when I had to just relax and like let my body do its thing, but just not have the expectation that labor was going to start early just
Yeah.
because people say second babies come earlier. I don't know if
Yeah.
you agree with that, Anna, but
Well, second babies don't necessarily come earlier, right? And there is no like, this is how it is. But I would say generally most will maybe be shorter in the labor time, but
Mhm.
not definitely not that they come earlier. That's not something that I believe.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I wish I wish I had known that. Like, because it probably would have saved myself a little bit of some heartburn on that one. But
Mm.
so anyway, um, lost a full mucus, what I felt was a full mucus plug, which clearly just regrows,
Yes.
if it's not the right time, right? And so then I remember, um, I woke up one morning and this is going to be the day that he was born. And I woke up and I was at this point, I was 40 weeks and 3 days. And I was so disappointed that labor hadn't started. Every single night, I was just watching home birth videos, which I highly recommend doing. Just like the more exposure I think you get to watching just like the beautiful birth process happen in a safe, healthy, happy, emotional way, like the more your body's going to,
Mhm.
um, I think, digest that subconscious
Yeah.
acceptance
Yeah.
of birth. And so I really highly recommend that. But I was just watching before bed, probably 4 or 5 YouTube home birth videos. And I'm like, my labor is going to start tonight. I really hope it does. Woke up, no labor. And I just remember getting in the shower and just bawling. My husband was with me and I was just bawling. I'm like, where is our baby? Where is he? And my husband is he's very, very logical, and he's a very loving person, but he's definitely not like an overly emotional person. And he just said, honey, whether it's today or tomorrow, this baby is coming very soon. And you just need to be patient with him, and he knows when he wants to be here. He knows when he wants to be here. Like, just trust. And he was just such a nice bedrock in that moment to just kind of bring me back a little bit. And I was like, you're right. And it was Martin Luther King Day, which is a holiday here. And so my little one, my at this point, kind of just over a year or so, didn't have his school that day. So my mom and I took him for a long walk in a nearby town. And I remember I really wanted an Italian sub, which you're not supposed to have because it's deli meats. And I just said, F it, I'm having the Italian sub today. Women can get epidurals, I can have a freaking Italian sub. So I
Yes.
so I had my Italian sub. And then my dad and my stepmom live just about 12 minutes from us. He came over and said, how about I watch your first son while you take a nap? And so I took like a 2 hour nap, which was
Mhm.
so amazing. And I said, I'm going to go to the chiropractor. I forgot to mention this. I had been going to a chiropractor the entire of my second pregnancy because I knew I wanted the baby to be in a really good position because he was going to be born at home. Of course, the
Mhm.
breech, um, the breech kind of discovery happened, and we just sort of upped our sessions with this
Mhm.
amazing chiropractor who I loved. So I got adjusted with her, felt great. And I just spent 2 hours, and this was cold, like snowy January. Again, it's New England, so it's quite
Mhm.
snowy. It's beautiful. I love the winter. Um, just alone, listening to your podcast for 2 hours, walking around a circle, like curb walking up and down. And it was such a nice 2 hours just for myself. And in retrospect, I wish I kind of had known, like, okay, you're going to give birth tonight. But it was like a really amazing, like, just time to myself, I think. And, I got home that night, and my mom actually lives with us. And so she had made us a beautiful dinner. I put my first son to bed. I had no idea it would be my last time putting him to bed as my only babe. And my mom made us, like I said, a nice dinner. We sat down 7:30, and I kind of told myself, I am going to take the pressure off of myself to try to have this baby tonight. I'm going to, instead of just sitting on a birth ball, like I had just been incessantly sitting on a birth ball or walking, moving around, stretching, this, that, I'm just going to sit on the couch and watch a funny movie with my husband tonight. And so we're like, all right, let's watch Grandma's Boy. It's like a stupid, funny movie that we haven't watched in forever. I said, it's a great idea. So we wrap up dinner around 8 o'clock. I said, I'm just going to run to the bathroom before we turn the movie on. So I run to the bathroom and I sit down on the toilet, and I just got this absolutely massive contraction, just like big guy right out of the gate. And I was like, because I just like, again, there had, with neither of my labors had like any sort of like a sweet little buildup. It was just like this big, strong, like, I'm ready. And I just remember I was like, oh my gosh. So I get my phone and I take a picture of myself in the mirror. And I had no idea like that this baby was going to be in my arms 90 minutes after this picture was taken. And it's like the funniest thing that to look back on because I look so like, oh, here I am, my first contraction. Like, it's just like funny. Like the timing is just tight. So I run up into the living room, which is not far from the bathroom. And I said, Drew, like I just had a contraction. And I think like, and then in the middle of my sentence, I got another one, probably equally strong, not stronger, like equally as strong. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just had another one. And this was probably about 5-ish minutes after the first one. And I said, all right, let's just put on the movie. Like, I don't want to get too ahead of myself here. So he puts the movie on, and we got to like literally like the title page of the movie, and I was on my hands and knees having another contraction. I'm like, turn the movie off. Like I turn turn the movie off. So he's like, all right, I'm gonna turn the movie off. He's like, I'm gonna text the midwives. because he knows, right? Like, and the whole like prenatal care for this, the midwives have been like, please tell us the minute. Because they also had, they had a bit of a drive. Like one of the midwife who was supposed to be coming was actually coming from Maine, which, where she is, I think it was about like 45 minutes. And another one was about 50 minutes to an hour away. So Drew texted the midwives and said, contractions have started. They're pretty regular, they're pretty strong. Want to let you guys know. And we kind of immediately alerted them. My mom comes in. She's like, oh my goodness, let's like kind of like watch this, like see how this goes. Now, mind you, I had had a birth pool set up in my room for like a freaking month because I thought this baby was coming early. So like the room was ready, the fairy lights are in the birth pool, the candles are all in the room. I mean, the room was like shrink wrapped, like ready for this birth to happen. Thank goodness that all of this prep had been done in advance. And mamas, just do it in advance. Don't wait. If it's important to you to have your space set up, if you're particular about how you want your space done, just set it up. Like just get it done, I would say, if you're able to, because things could progress more quickly than you anticipate. So, um, the people who were going to be at my birth were, of course, my mom, of course, my husband, and my stepmom, who I just adore. And she's always been a really spiritual person, throughout my entire life. She's been in my life for a very, very long time, since middle school. And so I wanted her there. And she only lives about 12 minutes away. So my mom texts her and my dad, my dad was going to come over and take my dog, to his house. And so she said, okay, Saige started having contractions. You guys might want to come get Sconset. That's our dog's name. And Marie said, you should know this because you're going to be here. So they're like, great, we're on our way. So this is where the story honestly gets a little bit blurry, because of just how quickly things happened. So I make my way up the stairs into the bedroom, and they were just at this point probably like a minute apart, 3 minutes apart, like not super consistently 3 minutes or 1 minute, but very tight and close together. And I just remember I got in the shower, and again, the room was all fully set up, ready to rock and roll. We've got Enya playing again. My birth playlist is jamming out. And I'm just in the shower on my hands and knees. And I very much felt like if you're in an ocean and you're trying to get past where the waves are breaking so that you can be in like the calm water and look back on the beach and just be kind of like settled. I felt like I was fighting very much against the waves, that feeling of just like I couldn't, I was having a hard time mentally like getting there, like just because of how quickly things were progressing. Like it almost felt like a tsunami kind
Mm.
of coming at me. And I was so desperate just to be on the other side of that wave.
Mm.
And that was tricky, like with how quickly this was happening. So I remember very distinctly feeling like I could not get in a comfortable place. And I was very much mentally kind of like scrambling a little bit. And I got out of the shower and I felt very much like I had to go to the bathroom because the babe was so close to coming out. So I sat on the toilet. I remember being like, I don't want to be on the toilet because I know it's the dilation station and I know that I don't need to be dilating more quickly. And the midwives were not close by, at all at this point. They were on their way, but like I said, there was close 45 minutes to an hour for each of them. And I'm like, I don't need to rush this process. I'm not trying to rush this process. In fact, I need this process to slow down a little bit. So I'm like on the toilet. I'm like, because I'm like, I feel like I have to go to the bathroom, but I don't want to be on the toilet. I want to be on my hands and knees. And my husband came in. This was the moment where there was like just such a crisis of confidence where I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know if I can, like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, this is just like an overwhelming
Mhm.
um, challenge right now. And he just looked right at me, and my mom was right there too. And he was like, you have got this. You have got this. You have done this before. You are so prepped to do this, Saige. Like, You just need to calm your mind. You need to calm your body. You need to just relax. And
Mm,
like, you are loved, you are safe, you are in your space. This is
mm,
exactly what we want. Like, you're good. And
mm,
my mom said something to the same effect. And I was just like,
mm,
you're right. And I just like, this speaks to the importance of who's in your birth space, I
mm,
think. Like, that energy, that calm, collected energy was exactly what I needed, like in that moment. So I got off the toilet and I had started to have a little bit of bleeding at that point. So I put on the really sexy undies that are like a pad, and they're not sexy at all for anyone who hasn't worn them. So I have them on, and I'm just like over the birth ball, and this is all on film, by the way. My like husband bought a tripod, and it was like the greatest thing ever that this was that I have these moments to look back on. And I'm just on the ball swaying, and I just remember feeling a big pop like in the undies, I'll call them. And I knew immediately it was my water, and the pop happened during a contraction. And I said to my husband and mom, like, oh, I think my water broke, or my water did break, or something to that effect. And my husband goes, oh, I'll go get it. So he comes back and brings my like huge water bottle. And my mom's like, no, honey, she said her water like broke. Like, she doesn't need her water right now. And he's like, he's just so sweet, and like kind of like frantically like trying to figure out what I need, make sure I have it. And there was definitely a little bit of meconium this time around in the water. So Drew texted a picture to the midwives. Again, they are just so amazing. They are just so calm as a cucumber. They're like, that's completely fine. That's completely fine. We're going to be there in about 30 minutes or whatever. Like, we're almost there. So at this point, I start feeling extremely pushy, like extreme. And so I didn't remember with my first birth, I didn't feel really that urge to push until he was coming out. And then I absolutely felt the urge to push, and I was actively pushing him out. Um, this time was very different. It very much felt like my body and my mind were actually separate beings, in the sense that the body was going to be doing whatever it wanted to do, and my mind had absolutely no control over that process. And my advice is, if this happens, it's a fetal ejection reflex, is to just get out of the way. Just get out of the way. Do not fight it. Let it win. Like, it is not you against your body. It is your body doing its job, what it's intended to do. And you need to just take your mind out of it and just let it do its thing, because it was so powerful, Anna. The feeling of the ejection, um, that I was like, wow, that is the fetal ejection reflex I have heard so much about. There it is. There's no mistaking what it is. Also, there's nobody here. Like, there's no midwife here. The night before, I had watched a birth video of something happening exactly like this. Again, fate is very interesting,
mm,
where this husband and wife just had their baby on the bed, and their midwife did not make it. And it was totally fine. It was a beautiful video. It was amazing, but it was playing out in real life. And I said, I think I'm pushing the baby out. And my husband and mom said, do you want to get in the pool? And I do remember thinking to myself, I have not been looking at a birth pool in my room for a month to not get in the pool. So I'm going to get in the pool. So I got in the pool, and that is when I mean, it was just over and over, the fetal ejection reflex. I just really felt it happening. And I'm kind of in there, and I'm like, the baby's gonna come out, and probably like really, really soon. I want to have the baby here in the water without the midwives? And everything in my body, for some reason, just said I didn't.
mm,
So I did a very quick like moment in the pool, and then actually got on the bed for the birthing process. And I, I I it was right for me in the moment. I sort of had wish I had had the pool birth experience. I did like the water, like I felt relief from the water, but I was just so far into the process that I there wasn't like much. I could have probably really been anywhere, and the baby was going to come out, but I just felt more comfortable on the bed. Um, so I got on hands and knees on the bed, Um, and my mom and Drew were just like running cold towels over my back. And I'm pretty surprised at watching the video of myself because I'm very calm. Um, this birth, I never reached that point of feeling that outer body experience that
Mm.
I did with my first son. I attribute that to the speed and the
Yes.
precipitous nature. I
Yeah.
see you nodding.
You
Yeah.
just you just don't have the time to build the hormones like you do, you know?
No,
That's the beauty of your body. It has this mechanism of, as you know, the more intensity, the more your own beta endorphins, kind of kick in. And that together with oxytocin, like that is what's, causing the altered state of consciousness and pain relief and all of that. And you just, yeah, when it's really quick, it's just doesn't have time to build in your system.
it didn't. I was so very, very conscious,
Yeah.
which I think is one of the reasons why I was like, I do want to be out of the pool if no one's going to be here.
Yeah.
Um, and so again, I'm so thankful I have the video, but basically I got on the bed and we're kind of doing our thing. I'm just swaying. I'm very quiet. Like I said, I'm doing the horse lips breathing, which I'm like, don't remember doing that at all, but apparently I was doing it. And the student midwife, who I just love and adore, came in so quietly, so respectfully, and all she says is, "Hi, Mama. I see you're working really hard. Like you're doing a great job." And that is the extent of what she did. Like she just came in and was just so quiet, but I felt so happy, even though she wasn't like, the full midwife, she was a familiar, trusted, loving face who had been with me my entire pregnancy. And I also felt very confident in her anyway. So I felt so
Mm.
much more relaxed with her there. And so contractions are happening. She gets the main midwife on FaceTime, who's on her way. She was probably about 20 minutes away at the main midwife. And my stepmom walked in the room probably about a minute after the student midwife walked in. And I just rewatched the video, so the timing is accurate on this. And 1 minute after my stepmother walked in, I said, Olivia, the student midwife, I said, the head is about to come out. And I'm on all fours, just like swaying, because I was trying very much to slow things down. And one thing I would like to say is talk to your baby in these moments and tell the baby what you think you need. When I was in the pool and having that, like the baby's coming out, I don't want to be in the pool, like that kind of moment, I said, baby, I need a break. I need a minute. I need to slow down for a minute. And I probably had like a good 5 minutes of no contractions, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in the moment they were coming so frequently that it felt like a year of just a break. And he did. Like he totally listened. I said, Mama needs a minute. I'm physically saying this in the video, like I need a minute. The baby will listen. And like I just think they will. I just totally think they will.
Mm.
So he gave me my minute, my 5 minutes. And his head popped out all in kind of one push. And at that moment, like my mom and everything was very quiet and there was no like, oh my goodness, yeah. But there was just like, oh, he's here, he's beautiful, like you're doing a great job. And I I just what's interesting, I'm curious to your take on this, Anna, is his head was out for 2.5 minutes
Mm.
before his body came out. And no one was the student midwife is completely fine with this. I was just doing my thing. Like he was just kind of there in between like two universes, I'd
Yeah.
say.
Did
And
he,
he,
did you have any contractions in between that time?
nope, nope.
Mm.
It was just the pause.
So
It
that's
was
it. That's perfectly normal. That's perfectly fine.
cool. Yeah. And so that's good to hear. Cause I mean, obviously everything turned out to be fine, but I like anyone who watches this video was like, oh my gosh, that's like a long time that his head is out. And I was like, I know it kind of does feel like a little bit of a long time, but his head popped out and I was just like on my hands and knees. And then the next big contraction, he just came right out and Olivia, my student midwife, caught him She just immediately passed him right through to myself. And again, Drew was kind of up, like right near me. Um, and I just looked down again, just saw that beautiful little face and just was flooded with love both times, like just so much love. And his cord was wrapped probably 3 times around his neck, which again probably would have been a big deal in the hospital. And we'd sort of prepared for this a little bit just in case he had come as quickly as he did, which again was 90 minutes after that first contraction in the bathroom. And so Drew's kind of trying to get the cord, and he just says, "Oh, like Olivia, the cord is wrapped around his neck." And Olivia, just calm as anything, goes, "That's okay. We're gonna unravel it. He's still getting oxygen from the placenta." Just like so gently,
Yeah.
so not non-emergent, like that's okay. Like he's completely fine. And the minute that final coil came off, he just let out this like gorgeous, like roar of a little scream, just
Mm.
like so strong and so sweet. Brought him up, and my I just imagine being my stepmom walking in, and literally 1 minute after she walked in the room, he was born. And it just was amazing. And I just remember feeling so like happy and just proud and just so like blown away with how that just happened. And it took me like a while to really process, I'd say, how
Mm.
quickly and just amazingly everything went. And I sat down with him, and my father, my dad, who was picking up my dog, you might remember, was just at the end of my driveway. And my mom calls him and says, um, "Bob, you need to come back. Your grandson is here." And he was like, "What?" And so my dad came back, and I thought it was so special to just be in that space with like my mom, my dad, my stepmom, my husband, my proper midwife, I'll call her, came probably about 5 to 10 minutes after he was born. And it was just like this love bubble, like of just like these just people who love me and love him. My little 1 year old was sleeping, across the hall, and it was just so beautiful, like just amazing. I did tear twice. By the way, I didn't mention it with my first son, but I had a second-degree tear. I think that one was probably attributed to the forced pushing, I would say. And then tore in the exact same place the second time around as well. But it honestly, like, I know tearing can be really scary for some people, and no one wants to tear, but it was not like a big deal. It just your body is so wise and it just heals right up. And I elected to have the stitches, but it was totally fine.
Yeah.
And the midwives that got me into my shower, and I just took like this like loving shower and just put the baby to the breast like immediately. It was just amazing. Like,
Mm.
oh, and the placenta. So talk about a different experience than the first time. So um I just said like probably like maybe 20 minutes or so after he was born, I said, "Oh, I feel like a little bit crampy. Um, I think I'm gonna try to like push the placenta out." And they said, "Yep, we were gonna see how we were feeling about that. Like, how are you feeling about maybe having the placenta now?" Said I think now is like the right time. So I just stood up and kneeled, and I just remember hearing, think it was on your podcast that like sometimes, pardon, sometimes like the oxytocin can like assist with the placenta coming. So I just had my little baby on my breast, and just like that started some contractions, and I just gave
Mhm.
like the slightest of pushes, just holding him,
Mhm.
kneeling up on my bed, and the placenta came out without fuss, without anyone touching it or pulling it or intervening at all.
Mhm.
And that was like a big part of something I had expressed to this team of midwives of like, I really didn't love that about my first birth. And they're like, we're not going to do that.
Mhm.
We're not going to do that. You don't ever need to worry about that. Like, if we have a concern, we'll let you know. But it just came to fruition. It was just like the most beautiful thing. It was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful story. Both of them. Really beautiful stories. So much
Yeah.
wisdom, so much body wisdom,
Yeah.
knowledge.
I feel like I'm very fortunate to feel like proud of like a lot of things. That my births are my biggest pride.
Mm. Yeah. It really shows you your power and your divinity, doesn't it?
Yes, it really does. It's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing them with us. I
Yes, I'm so
know,
happy to.
yeah, and I know that so many mamas and women who are, going to have babies are going to find so much solace in what you shared.
So,
And
I,
especially also, yeah, tearing can, when you haven't done it, can feel really scary, the prospect of that. And it's so nice to hear how your experience was that it was just nothing.
it
And
just really wasn't a thing.
mm,
It just wasn't.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
But part of
beautiful.
it is to really rest after your
Mm,
postpartum. Like, and they told me, they said, if you cannot leave this floor for like 2 weeks, I
yeah.
know that's going to be hard, but your body's going to thank you for it. And I didn't.
Okay. Well,
I
that's how
didn't.
traditions throughout the world have always done it,
Mm.
everywhere. The 40 days is something
Hmm.
that all cultures have had around that time period. Being in bed, being around the bed, being in the house,
Hmm.
before venturing out and really allowing your body, mind, and soul to rest and recover, and for you to bond with your baby, establish breastfeeding, all of these things.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
if you had a first-time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
I would say, don't take advice from people whose birth you don't want. People are, yeah.
Yes.
Everyone's going to come out of the woodwork and tell
Oh,
you
yeah.
all about this, that. And if you get to the end of that story and you say, I don't want that for myself in your mind, don't
Mm,
take that advice.
mm-mm.
Take the advice of women whose births you do want.
Yes.
And I would get that advice from this podcast, from your circle, your beautiful circles that you hold. Like you have such an amazing community.
Mm,
Those are the women who you want advice from. And then the second piece is film it if you can. Try to document it. Doesn't need to be fancy. Literally, like I said, my husband had a tripod up with a cell phone, and I'm one of those people that has like 3,000 videos on their phone of like their dog and now all my kids. My birth videos are my favorite thing to look on.
mm.
And I will always look. And the other thing is to write them down.
Yeah.
Like when you feel like you've got the energy as close in time to the birth as possible, write them down. I can't wait to give them to my son someday.
Mm,
And I just hope they live on. And in fact, my thank you notes to my midwives included my handwritten birth stories and just like some special little things for them. And they were really touched by it. But I wouldn't have been there without them. So record it. It's so, so special, so important.
oh, that's beautiful advice. I really love that advice so much. Thank you so
It's
much.
simple advice, but I think it's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, they're so good. All of them. They're so good. Thank you so much, Sage, for sharing all your birthing wisdom with us. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as the Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.